Lawmakers in Florida are introducing more bills to reshape education. The ideals include strengthening parents' ability to veto K-12 class materials and extending a ban on teaching about gender and sexuality. At least 25 states have passed 64 laws in the past 3 academic years that change what students can learn and do. Passages from Christopher Columbus' journal describing his brutal treatment of indigenous people, a data set on New York police's use of force analyzed by race. These are among the items teachers have nixed from their lesson plans this school year and last. Facing pressures from parents worried about political indoctrination, administrators weary of controversy, and a spate of new state laws restricting education on race, gender, and LGBTQ issues. Well, Chris Rock finally let loose on getting slapped at the Oscars. The comedian told his story in a live Netflix stand-up special Saturday, nearly a year after actor and rapper Will Smith hit him on stage over a joke about Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. We can't repeat a lot of the language, but he joked about infidelity in the Smiths' relationship and said he still has Smith's 90s hit, Summertime, ringing in his ears. In California, a California speech that drew protests, Governor from Florida, Rick DeSantis, stokes fight over pandemic. The Florida governor's speech at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library served as an audition before conservatives for a Republican, many expect to run for president in 2024. And mental health care providers are scarce in the United States. In 2019, there were just 14 practicing child and adolescent psychiatrists for every 100,000 children. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry says that children with the most serious diagnoses wait on average several years for appropriate treatment. An increasing number of teens are being certified to help their peers, since it's very common for young people to first turn to a friend rather than an adult. And Alex Murdaugh was sentenced Friday to 2 consecutive life terms for murdering his wife. Jurors are already speaking out, some going on national television shows this morning, saying that they didn't buy his story, said that they believed his tears were all fake, and that the lawyer thought he could outsmart the jurors, and some jurors said taking the witness stand was a death blow to his case. The Attorney General for the state of South Carolina also said he believes Alex Murdaugh loved himself more than he loved his wife and his younger son. And over the weekend, President Joe Biden used the searing memories of Selma's Bloody Sunday to recommit to a cornerstone of democracy. The president made a commitment to continue to push for voter protections through Congress and what we know now to be a conservative Supreme Court. He says he is not deterred and will continue to fight for the rights of all Americans to have access to the ballot box. Reverend William Barber, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and 6 other activists wrote to Joe Biden and members of Congress to express their frustration with the lack of progress on voting rights legislation. And a task force set to discuss and issue recommendations about California's debt to the descendants of enslaved people kicked off a 2-day public hearing on Friday, and it was clear that members and the public in attendance were hopeful its impact could reach beyond the state's borders. It was also clear that lots of folks are not too happy with the California State Reparations Task Force. We'll see what their recommendations are when they issue their final report in July of this year. Well, this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin, and this is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In my first hour today, I'm super excited because I'm joined by 2 of my favorite contributors. Professor Treva Lindsay is here, and my favorite LA Times columnist, Gustavo Rolano, is here joining us today. And in my second hour, we're going all in on the true crime genre. Americans across this country are so fascinated with crime and crime shows. We're going to preview some big cases that have captured the nation's attention, all the money that is spent by networks, podcasts, and even radio stations on true crime stories. And we're going to introduce you to KBLA's new justice correspondent. She's going to be joining us every day starting tomorrow as we bring you gavel to gavel on the federal bribery case against LA Sitting Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. But before I bring on my guests in real time, here's what's on my mind. I don't know if you saw it. This may be a spoiler alert, but nearly 1 year after the Oscar night slap heard around the world, Chris Rock finally let loose with his thoughts about what happened when he made that joke about Jada Pinkett Smith. And boy, he went all in on Will Smith. He talked about woke and cancel culture and gave examples of what he calls selective outrage. For example, the kind of people who play Michael Jackson's songs but won't play R. Kelly. And he also gave other examples of what he calls modern hypocrisies, like typing out woke ass tweets on a phone made by child slaves. He talked about opioids. He talked about Meghan Markle. Like, you were surprised that the British were racist? Really? They're colonizers. Everybody knows that. If you have not seen Chris Rock's new special, you have to check it out. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but he has a response to how he is still feeling about the slap that was heard around the world. Some folks say it was one of his most brilliant stand-up comic acts. Others are scratching their heads, saying, not sure if this is what they expected, but obviously it's a big deal. We've been waiting to hear from Chris Rock, and we finally now know what he's thinking in real time about that slap. When we come forward, my contributors weigh in on today's trending news. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Congratulations to Hertz Rent-A-Car for being this week's winner of KBLA's Office of the Week. Log on to KBLA1580.com to enter your office to win lunch for 10, delivered by John O'Groats Family Restaurant.
This world has its limits, but in the all-new, all-electric Nissan Areva, you've got a world of possibilities. You can leave it all behind in serene interiors, or you can go after it with available e-Force all-wheel drive. Go your way in the all-new, all-electric Nissan Areva. Nissan Areva with e-Force not yet available for purchase. Expected availability early 2023, subject to change. e-Force all-wheel drive is an optional feature. e-Force cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions.
You know that Big Burger detergent jug is 85% water, right?
85% water? I thought I was getting a better deal because it's so big.
If you want a better clean, Tide Pods are only 12% water. The rest is pure concentrated cleaning ingredients. Don't pay for water, pay for clean.
Save $10 when you spend $30 on Tide and Downy. Water content based on the leading bargain liquid detergent. Must buy at least one participating Tide or Dreft detergent item, plus at least one participating Downy and or Bounce scent booster, liquid fabric softener, or dryer sheets. Prepaid card by mail. Visit pglaundryrebate.com for terms and conditions.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. South Central Youth Empowered Through Action is the youth component of the impactful CBO, known as the Community Coalition. South Central Youth Empowered Through Action has chapters at almost every South LA high school. Say Yeah, as they are popularly known, is located at 80th and Vermont, but serves young people all over South LA. Under the COCO umbrella, they train youth organizers, help underserved scholars prepare for college, and work with students to help them gain admission to top universities. South Central Youth Empowered Through Action fosters teen activism, where young people have led campaigns moving tens of millions of dollars to South LA schools and forcing officials to make AP classes available to students in under-resourced institutions. SCEL scholars have taken part in the March on Washington, been published in major news outlets, and been elected to city council. Long before she was mayor, Karen Bass started the program when she founded the Community Coalition. To donate, volunteer, or enroll a student in South Central Youth Empowered Through Action, please visit cocsouthla.org. cocsouthla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk Radio.
I'm back with two of my favorite contributors. I'm here with Ohio State professor and author of America Goddamn, Treva Lindsay. Welcome, Treva. I think you are muted, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm loving the new hairstyle. It looks cool, really cool.
Thank you.
Somebody who's on a sabbatical, but who's not.
Yes.
Really on a sabbatical. And also, LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano is back with us. Hello, Gustavo.
Gracias. Gracias for having me as always.
And probably after being on the show 50 times, I'm going to pronounce your last name correctly, but
you got it. You got it. You got nothing to worry about.
Head, not my heart, because you know I love you dearly. So I'm so happy to have you back. All right. I sent both of you guys this article that was written in the LA Times today. And Gustavo was written by a couple of your, I assume, colleagues over at the LA Times, Matt Hamilton in particular. And I know Matt is an investigative reporter. And it's a story about donors who are giving money or who have given money for this legal defense fund for a LA City Council member. His name is Mark Ridley Thomas, friend of mine, no secret there. And the show is going to be covering gavel to gavel this federal bribery trial that begins for Mark Ridley Thomas tomorrow. We're going to have a justice correspondent in our second hour who's going to be joining us every day as we bring folks the latest and take them inside that courtroom. But I was reading this article, Gustavo. I'll start with you. And I'm going to ask Treva after I ask you, because I could be biased because I've known Mark a long time. But I just felt that an undertone of this article was, how dare this Black man who works for the city, who gets a government salary, how dare him have the gall, the unmitigated gall, the audacity to start a legal fund, which they acknowledge is completely legal for an elected official to do so. But to do that and raise the kind of money, don't loan money to himself, and hire these, what they call high-priced lawyers, $1,000 an hour lawyer, which if you know anything about lawyers, that's pretty much the going rate for partners in big law firms. That could be $1,000 to $2,000. And when the United States government is indicting you, prosecuting you, I mean, it's the resources of the government. It's the U.S. Attorney's Office. Every Harvard, Stanford, Yale, UCLA graduate wants to work in that office. So they got some of the best lawyers, the same lawyers who are going to leave that office and go be those partners charging $1,000 to $1,500 an hour. So if the government can have the best lawyers, how is it that somebody who's being prosecuted by the government can't do the same as long as they're doing it legally and asking their friends who love them, hey, give me, help me out here. I don't know. I didn't like the tone of the article, Gustavo.
I mean, Matt is a friend of mine. Katie Licari is also one of our awesome fellows. I saw it more as just our continued coverage of here's this legend, this legendary politician, longtime supervisor, council member who, is going on trial. There has been nothing proved. He gets, like every person gets his day in court, but he does come in the wake of a lot of interesting things happening at the LA City Council. And two of his former colleagues, Mitch Englander and Jose Huizar, which, full disclosure, Jose Huizar is from the same part of Mexico where my family's from. So he's not my friend, but I know people who know him and we've seen him as parties. So you want to talk about embarrassment? Oh man, me and Huizar. But anyway, so Huizar and Englander, they pled guilty. They're like, nah, we see the government, we're not going to do it. But also, they weren't legends like Mark Ridley Thomas. Mark, on the other hand, he's like, all right, I've been around here for a while. People know me. People know all the things that I've done for South LA as a supervisor, as a council member. So I'm going to lean on them. So if you read, if folks read the article, they'll see people saying like, hey, he's a friend of mine. I know he's good. Of course, I'm going to give money.
But look at your word, Gustavo. You said lean on them. Versus ask my friends to help me out. I'm in a bad spot. These are people I've known for 50 years. And I'm glad you brought up Huizar and Englander, because I felt like the article was saying these guys took a plea deal. And I think Huizar had a public defender. So it was almost, again, and Treva, I don't know, I could be reading too much into this, but I know you study African-American history. It was like this Black guy, how dare him not plead guilty. And the article at one point says he was defiant. Well, if you think you're innocent, you're probably going to be defiant. Not plead or not have a public defender or a, lower price lawyer, and maybe I'm triggered because I'll tell you why. In the Chris Rock special, he says his mother, then he makes this joke, not Harriet Tubman, but his mother had to go to a vet to get her teeth pulled, because in this town in South Carolina in 1945, 1955, if you were Black and the Black dentist couldn't take you because their list was too long and you couldn't get in, you had to go to a vet. You couldn't go to a white dentist. And he was so proud to say, now I fly my mother to Paris twice a year to have coffee with my daughter who's in culinary school in Paris. So, in your face kind of to racism. So I don't know, maybe watching that and then reading this article, like the dude wants the best lawyer that money can purchase. And I would think anybody, Black, white, red, or green, if you're indicted by the federal government, that's what you would want. Jump in, Treva.
Sure. I mean, I think that's the case. I think that is what you would want. I think a lot of terms obviously can be very loaded and very triggering for us, right? Defiant can register in a particular way when it's a Black man being described as defiant. But defiant is not a bad thing if you're on trial and being accused of things that you believe you haven't done. I think you would be defying certain expectations and doing that. So I think, again, that I understand why the language would be triggering and a figuration because of the ways that we know often that Black people in this nation are covered and are seen, especially when it comes to the legal system, our relationship to the legal system and the expectations that people have of how we're going to navigate that, not taking a plea, not in any way conceding guilt in any particular way. When we have a criminal legal system that's often predicated upon pleas, right? I mean, a large part of our legal system is based on the fact and the hope that people take pleas and feel the threat of the legal system at their door. And I think the lean on, Reen, again, I said, like, I wouldn't have read it necessarily negatively, except for the fact that we know that there's a language of kind of criminality and, not quite above boardness that often traffics alongside Black people's identity. So yes, I'm asking all my rich friends to help me if I'm on trial for something. I won't
any
pretend.
of us. If our friends aren't rich, I was like, hey man, let's do a carne asada, like the homie defense.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm like, if I'm on trial, I want the Johnny Cochran, I want the Lawrence Tribe, I want Charles Ogletree, I want them all wrapped up in one. If they cost $5,000 an hour, I want that, because that's
exactly
what the government is bringing, all of that and more to bear with the endless resources that the government has. So we're going to talk about that. Like I said, I think we all, Gustavo, and you can pass this on to Matt, when you're writing about Black folks, you got that language, man. Check it out with your cultural department, your DEI department, somebody at that LA Times, because people don't necessarily mean language to have an implicit bias to it, but there is language that we are so, that does have, it's coded.
It's a totally fair critique. We got the same critiques when we were covering Jose Huizar. I mean, with the whole Kevin De Leon scandal, we got so much blowback, especially from Latinos saying, well, why are you standing with the quote unquote Blacks? You're supposed to stand with Latinos. And myself and a lot of my Latino colleagues like, no, anti-Blackness is anti-Blackness. And it's even worse when it's coming from Latinos, because we should know better. We historically have had alliances with Black politicians. We were part of that coalition who brought in Tom Bradley and also Mark Ridley Thomas, because let's not forget, nowadays South LA is majority Latino and has been for a while, even if the voting the voting blocks aren't necessarily just there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just shows how much work we have to do in journalism, how much work we have to do in media, how much work we have to do, period, around issues of race and marginalized people. And just because you become an elected official or a professor or someone of affluence, at the end of the day, you're still Black, you're still brown. And we have to be careful about how we use language when talking about those folks. I want to talk about Christopher Columbus's journal describing his brutal treatment of indigenous people and the New York police use of force data. Some schools are saying, we're not teaching that anymore. We're just doing away with any of those facts we don't like about race, right? About gender, about LGBTQ issues. Professor Lindsay, I'll call you now Professor Lindsay, you are at a university. what the heck? How can we expect a journalist to be sensitive to these race issues when they're going to go through a whole program at a university and not be able to talk about these race issues? So I'm going to hold these guys that are already working, I'm going to hold them a little differently, accountable a little differently. But if you're 18, 19, 20, and you're in college today, and you can't talk about the truth about Christopher Columbus or the truth about New York and its use of force and its stop and frisk and all of its other policies that are targeted, racial profiling, what are we raising? What can we expect of people when they go into the workplace?
Well, we can't expect a lot. I think this is a very targeted campaign. It is absolutely targeting marginalized communities. It is targeting knowledge bases that are so important to those who are in search of an actualized democracy, that what we're seeing is a pivot in all arenas of life, be that care, healthcare, be that education, where we are in terms of adjusting criminal justice reform in the nation, the environment. We're seeing all of these things colliding in a hard pivot to the right. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that, acknowledge the language that's being used in this moment, not to mince words about what's happening, and to be pointed in our critiques, first of all, as an educator, that I got into this because I want to share robust truths about marginalized communities. And so I am willing now my job is a lot riskier than it was just 3 years ago, doing the work that I do, particularly as a women, gender, and sexuality studies professor. I'm teaching about the history of abortion. I'm teaching about the history of trans rights. I'm teaching about the history of queer communities. I invite drag queens to my classroom. And these are all sites where we're seeing very, very orchestrated and effective attacks from all kinds of organizations that are being funded and are winning. And they're winning in a way that has a deep impact on our elections, that has a deep impact on our courts, that has a deep impact on the ways we even relate on an interpersonal level in our communities. And so I think this is very intentional. And I think those of us who are fearful of what's coming and angry about what's coming, enraged about what's coming, have to do our parts with whatever skills we have to rail against this. To be defiant, right? To be defiant.
25 states, Gustavo, have passed 64 laws just in the last 3 years that change what students can learn. How far does this culture war, Ron DeSantis? Ron DeSantis, I'm thinking of Rick Scott and
Ron the Fascist.
Ron the Fascist.
I'm just combining their names. So Ron's at Ronald Reagan. That's Orange County, California, right outside of Los Angeles. He's auditioning for the 24 Republican nomination, testing the waters in California, small Republican party in California, but still a Republican party here. How far does he get to stoke these culture wars, you think? And, do they give him a ticket into that #1 slot for the Republican, nominee?
He and others are going to stoke it all the way to what they think is going to be an electoral sweep, because to the professor's point, folks like her and others are winning in the most important ways, hearts and minds. When you talk to young people, as a reporter, I could tell you that some of my most popular stories or columnists are the ones about history, because people realize, we're reporting the truth. The professor's teaching the truth. These are not lies. These are things that happen. And these young men and women and other folks, they think, why haven't we been told this before? And if they're not telling us this, what else are they hiding from us? This is why, there's been so much hatred to Nicole Hannah-Jones and the 1619 Project and critical race theory and ethnic studies and all of this stuff. And DeSantis, he's no dummy. He knows that there's a big section of the American population who says we do not want the truth out. We want our history to be very simple. It was Reagan, it was Washington, it was Lincoln, and just leave it at that. And so they are going to beat this drum through the 2024 election and beyond. You remember, Republicans now run a lot of the state legislatures. They're going to continue to pass these laws. This is just the beginning. And it is far more dangerous to be a professor now, or a teacher, or a librarian, or anyone who wants to just teach the basic truth about this nation and its past than ever before.
And what's scary, Gustavo, you raise a good point. Republicans control a lot of our state legislatures, which means they control a lot of state universities. So they have the power to dictate what those state universities can do. I have a friend who's a college professor in a state that is run by Republicans, and the Republican governor gets to put on his board his appointees. So these boards now are pretty much dictating to this president what he can and cannot do. And he's having to question whether he can even stay in this job because he has this Republican-run board that is, putting its nose in the business of the day-to-day operations of a college in a way that they're not qualified to do so. And, he has real concerns about the pressure that it's putting on him and what it's doing to his teaching staff. And so these states have a lot of power beyond just passing laws. They control the boards of some of these state universities, and then not to mention these private universities who are getting on board, taking up the MAGA mantra and changing their own curriculum and, banning books and banning certain topics. It's a really scary time to not only be a professor, I think, but to be a teacher in a high school and to be a student. When we come forward, we're going to talk about the Chris Rock letting loose, what that means, and where does he go next? What does it mean for Will Smith, who has a big movie that's out as we get into the pre-Oscar season? Stay with us right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Come forward.
I'm Esther Dillard, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A U.S. official is confirming gunmen assaulted and kidnapped 4 American citizens in northeastern Mexico on Friday. Video obtained by CNN indicates one of the victims appears to be Black. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the Biden administration is monitoring that situation.
These sorts of attacks are unacceptable. Our thoughts are with the families of these individuals, and we stand ready to provide all appropriate consular assistance.
CNN reports it was a case of mistaken identity. The group was traveling to a border city for medical procedures, and 2 aircraft clipped wings near the gates of Boston Logan International Airport this morning. United Flight 515 headed to Newark, New Jersey, and United Flight 267 bound for Denver, Colorado were both canceled as a result. And that's the latest. I'm Esther Dillard from the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
In Seal Beach on the 405 southbound right at Seal Beach Boulevard, got a disabled vehicle trying to clear over to the right shoulder. You've already got some slowing from at least 7th Street. In Brea, 57 northbound right at Imperial Highway, got a crash over on the right shoulder. Then at Tonner Canyon Road, another disabled vehicle in the center divider area. And in Artesia, 91 westbound at Pioneer Boulevard, got that wreck over on the right shoulder.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer over 50 different custom window treatments, including faux wood blinds and shutters, all at prices less than retail. Plus, we'll send you free samples before you buy. Don't hire an expensive pro. Do it yourself and save big at Blindster.com.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. Visit jpmorganchase.com/racial equity and get the tools to help reach your financial goals.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
UCLA moved up to number 2 in this week's AP Men's College Basketball rankings. It's the first time the Bruins have been ranked number 2 in the country in the regular season since February 26, 2007. The Bruins, riding a 10-game winning streak, are 27-4 overall, 18-2 in the Pac-12 Conference. Houston is number 1. The top 5 after UCLA, Kansas, Alabama, and Purdue. Hottest team in the NBA right now, the New York Knicks. The Knicks are 12 games over 500 after winning 9 straight. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete.
Aaron at Original Taco Pete's. Come in today for our tasty seasoned black taco. We're at 3272 West Slauson off Crenshaw, or call 323-348-4441.
Hi, I'm civil rights attorney Areva Martin, host of Areva Martin in Real Time, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Be sure to tune in weekdays at 4:35 p.m. starting Tuesday, March 7th for your daily download on the federal bribery trial of LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. The case is sure to have many twists and turns, and our program will be the show of record in the case of United States versus Mark Ridley Thomas. We have our own seasoned justice correspondent who will be checking in with us to keep you up to speed on the daily details of this high-profile legal case. Be sure to tune in to Areva Martin in real time, weekdays at 4:35 p.m., starting Tuesday, March 7th, for United States versus Mark Riley Thomas, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
The Los Angeles Urban League and Parkside Economic Development Corporation are working to close the wealth gap between Black and white households. BWARP, the Black Wealth Attainment and Retention Program's free virtual workshops will help your family acquire, gain, maintain, and pass down legacy wealth. Learn from the experts about making more with what you have, the Black history of money, joining the Smart Investors Club, preserving your assets in tough times, crypto, cash in or cash out, the wealthy mind and body. Register for this free series that could change your financial future at laul.org/BWAARP. Don't miss BWARP, the Black Wealth Attainment and Retention Program, every second and fourth Thursday in February, March, and April at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Register now at laul.org/BWAARP.
Our Weekly Los Angeles is the largest audited Black newspaper in the state of California, with a distribution of over 50,000 copies weekly. Pick up a copy every Thursday to get the latest news on African American communities of LA. You can also keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and surrounding cities by going to www.ourweekly.com. The Our Weekly website is updated daily with the current news about us and for us. For your advertising needs, Our Weekly offers economical advertising packages to fit your budget. Feel free to call Our Weekly Los Angeles at 323-905-1300 or visit the website at www.ourweekly.com. Our Weekly Los Angeles, reporting news that matters to you.
Thanks to our new sponsor, Lendistry. Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered in Los Angeles. Lendistry helps small business owners access the affordable capital needed to grow. Visit Lendistry, LENDISTRY.com/KBLA today.
This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin, and we are tracking today's trending news, and I am joined in this hour by my two contributors, Gustavo Arellano. He is a columnist at the LA Times. You have read his columns before, always insightful. And also joining me is Professor Treva Lindsay. She's a professor at Ohio State University. Okay, Treva, I know you're on sabbatical, but did you get a chance to watch that Chris Rock special on Netflix yet?
I did get an opportunity to watch it. That is part of sabbatical life, getting to at least attempt to have some fun.
All right, so give me your gut reaction. Well, what did you think?
It wasn't my favorite. I'll say that. I think he covered a lot of ground. In it, I felt this is part of where I felt like, oh, I'm actually the kind of micro generation between Gen X and millennials, because it felt very anti-millennial, anti-Gen Z at some point. So, but I also just felt from a comedic standpoint that it didn't grab me in the way that I was hoping it would. I mean, Chris Rock is a very smart comedian. And has specials that are among some of my favorite in the last 30 or so years. And yet I felt that this one, maybe because the anticipation was so high, given what we all were waiting to hear, his own response to that, some of the jokes to me felt like I'd heard them before, even from him. Whether it was, he has a pretty particular kind of respectability politics that plays into some of his comedy. He has a certain kind of relationship to women that comes out through some of this. In particular, it's notable to me that he chose to do the special in Baltimore, which is Jada Pinkett Smith's hometown, as opposed to Philly. I was kind of hoping he was going to go to Philly and go hard with it about Will, the kind of using the skills that he has against the Will Smith. So I was a little, what's somewhere between underwhelmed. Like. I was a little underwhelmed. I was going to say maybe just whelmed, underwhelmed. There were things that I did.
Well, let me jump to the end because, again, spoiler alert, it's the
Yes.
end where he really goes all in on the Will Smith slap and the controversy. What do you feel about how he handled that?
I mean, I think he got off his chest. I can tell it still feels very raw from him, and I want to honor that. I was a little shocked how much of the antagonism was towards Jada. I think that was the part that was a little shocking for me to hear. There were some words used to describe her, and they have their own kind of 25-year history. I mean, this dates back in certain ways to jokes being made and interactions that have happened in 1997. So I think that, I was a little shocked by that. I was expecting even more to go towards Will than Jada. But he really kind of attacked the Smiths broadly. And I think he has every right to. I don't in any way want to diminish that he was hurt by what happened. It was absolutely, he was assaulted. I have no argument against the fact that that is in fact what happened on that stage. And I also expected more from Chris Rock. I honestly did. I expected something smarter. That's what I guess I should say in terms of his own analysis of that. Did I have a couple chuckles? Sure.
What about you, Gustavo? Have you had a chance to watch it yet?
Oh, yeah. I saw it live. Chris Rock, one of my top 5 comedians of all time. You talk about the respectability politics. He lands a lot with, the Latino community because of that, for better or for worse. I give this one a B. I laughed throughout. I did. But him and just too many comedians right now, they're obsessed with wokeness. They're obsessed with trans anything. It's like, come on, man, be smarter, move on. There was a really great essay in the Baltimore Banner. It's a nonprofit news agency out in Baltimore, and it specifically talked about how, okay, we get it. You got socked by Will Smith. That did not make you happy. But did you have to take it on Jada? Did you have to just go at her, using the B word, going to Baltimore, having it there? It's like, come on, Chris, it's not like you're not going to be above that, and you have every right to not be above that, but you are better than that.
But didn't it feel like that was all about continuing to needle at Will, like taking, the little knife and turning it? Like, you think I've done your wife in, you think I did her in at the Oscars. Let me show you what I'm going to do and what I'm capable of doing. That's kind of how I read it. Like, it was a purposeful, more in your face. You think you got the last laugh, and yes, you're bigger than me. You trained for Muhammad Ali. You got the part. Of course, I'm a little guy, blah, blah, blah. He goes on about their size differential. But it felt like I am going to every way that I can punish you, and I'm going to punish you by, degrading your wife, because he really laid in on her affair with the son's friend, and he really wanted to just basically paint her as the worst version of a woman, right? He wanted us to think she was this like slut. She was this, who does that? Like, who has an affair with their sons? He's all indignant about that. So I knew that was probably making your blood boil as a woman.
I was just like, it just felt unnecessary. I mean, here's the thing. There was so much to say about Will. Like, if you wanted to do that, and I know Chris Rock, that thing that Gustavo's mentioning here, Chris Rock is smarter than this. And that is what lacked for me. And so for me, once again, tapping into that specific form of misogyny that we've talked about before, Reva, that misogynoir as a way to get at him, that again just reasserts the fact that, like, I'm going to denigrate this other person because I know it hurts you, but I don't care that it's extraordinarily hurtful to this woman. And even if he felt a type of way about her, it's interesting, he used the B word to talk about Jada, but he talked about the behavior of Will being like, the behavior of him, right? Right, versus her being one. And so even in that, I'm like, this man slapped you. This man harmed you. This man created this moment
but Treva,
in this history.
He feels like the man slapped him because he was defending the woman that he wanted us to be clear about. He has absolutely zero respect for.
Right.
So it's like, you're defending this B, and now I'm going to really just put your whole personal business out, if anybody forgot about it, let me remind you.
I was like, it's a Smith. We all know on any given day what they're having for lunch, right? I mean,
but
dealing with
in case you forgot, there was a whole interview, and who does that? I mean, he was this I don't know, this kind of selective indignation, Gustavo.
Selective outrage, just like the title of his special. When he was going specifically at Will, he was brilliant, saying, you know, I took it like Pacquiao. You know, if there's open heart surgery on me, I'm still wearing a sweater. Homeboy's bigger than me. That was smart. That was getting right at him. And yeah, you were going to go after the wife, but that's easy picking. In his mind, that's easy pickings because people are always going to be, oh my gosh, I can't believe they have an open relationship. We're still such a prudish society that it just, the idea that Jada and Will they say we love each other. We're also having a relationship where we're talking about these things. That going back to this idea of respectability politics. Oh my God, that's like the antithesis of this. So Chris was just going at what he thought was going to be like the most shocking thing. No, the most shocking thing is that Will, who's bigger than you, slapped you, and you as a small man, you didn't back down. And then, you know, I still think his best line was the one that he said at the Academy Award, said, "This is the greatest moment ever. This is the most hilarious moment ever." Like that worked. That worked.
Well, his respectability politics too. The very last sentence, you know, he pays homage to his parents. So his parents still have, you know, he's remembering his lessons growing up about how do you respond to a bully. And, you know, that's his, you know, mic drop moments. Excuse me, spoiler alert, but you need to watch it. And don't worry, you won't remember anything we said here today. And you'll still either enjoy it or you'll, I don't know, Gustavo gives it a B. What are you, Treva? C minus?
It was average for Chris. That is the thing. I have high expectations for Chris Rock, and this didn't do it for me. And I actually heard in the Philly version of the show, when he was kind of working on this material, he actually did it in reverse order. And so the Will Smith stuff started the show because it was like, I'm going to dive right in. And I think this one was trying to give the build because everyone was coming to see that. And
to watch it.
Live airing on Netflix, this, you know, new kind of opportunity and platforming of this. And so it kept people going until the end.
You had to watch it because I was like, okay, dude, I need you to tell me what you're going to say about Will Smith, or else I'm going to be like going to the Soprano reruns or something. So
at least it was better than Chappelle.
Yeah, I thought it was better than Chappelle as well.
Yeah, because Chappelle, it was just whiny. Chris at least was funny. Last Chappelle ones that I've seen, I haven't even laughed. It's like, dude, come on. Okay, you're making yourself out to be a free speech warrior when you're not. You're just bullying at this point.
But I think what you say, Gustavo, is so true. These comedians are in this weird place. They don't know how to deal with this whole concept of cancel culture and wokeness. So they're taking pot shots at it. They're really going after it. And this whole, you know, like, Chris Rock spends the first 45 minutes talking about the hypocrisy and woke culture and cancel culture. When we come forward, I want to talk about the daughters. I don't know, something about what he said about those daughters drove me a little crazy too. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Black women get the job done. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by Lendistry. Story courtesy of CaliforniaBlackMedia.org. Representative Barbara Lee holds her first campaign rally at Laney College in Oakland, California, declaring, "We fight for freedom, dignity, justice, and together we win." Representative Lee said that that's why she's running for U.S. Senate. She is the highest-ranking African-American woman in the U.S. Congress and the only African-American so far in the 2024 California senatorial race. Lee, who is 76, is serving her 12th term in the U.S. Congress. I'm Maisha Cairo for KBLA 1580, and that's your K-Black Minute News.
Thanks to our new sponsor, Lendistry. Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered in Los Angeles. Lendistry helps small business owners access the affordable capital needed to grow. Visit Lendistry, LENDISTRY.com/KBLA today.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673. or live chat at calhope.org today.
Before new Cascade Platinum Plus, I would pre-rinse all my dishes because my old detergent just wouldn't get them clean. But now, I do dishes differently. And no pre-wash, no rewash, money-back guaranteed kind of different. Because Cascade Platinum Plus has double the grease fighting power of Dawn built right in, with twice the scrubbing power, giving me a clean that lets me break all the dish rules. I just scrape, load, and I'm done. Yep, so clean. With Cascade Platinum Plus, I dare to dish differently.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for voting rights. When We All Vote is a leading national nonpartisan initiative on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election by helping to close the race and age gap. Created by Michelle Obama, When We All Vote brings together individuals, institutions, brands, and organizations to register new voters across the country and advance civic education for the entire family and voters of every age to build and inform and engage electorate for today and generations to come. When We All Vote empowers their supporters and volunteers to take action through voting, advocating for their rights, and holding their elected officials accountable. Please visit whenweallvote.org to stand up for your rights, voting rights. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. I'm back and I'm joined by my brilliant contributors, Professor Treva Lindsay and LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano. And real quickly, Treva, the part Chris Rock special, the part that focuses on his two daughters, what do you think about that part?
Yeah, not a fan. Not a fan at all. But that's unsurprising. I think that Chris Rock has a gender issue. And I think that runs through even specials of his that I do enjoy. I think there is a consistent way that women and girls show up in his comedic performance that are not particularly thoughtful. For me, or thought-provoking in ways that are interesting and aligned with the other very sharp and incisive kind of critiques, commentaries of that, without giving too much away for those who haven't watched. I just find myself always disappointed when he gets to the parts where he's homing in on the experiences and his experiences with girls and women, especially those who are familiarly related to him, connected to him.
Yeah, sitting there cringing like, oh my God. Like,
yeah, it was a lot.
Daughter in culinary school, please don't be watching this because this is a lot. But okay, we'll revisit this. I got to move on. Gustavo, Sunday was Bloody Sunday of the reenactment of that march across the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And Biden says, look, I'm going to keep pushing for enhanced voting protections, even though he's facing this Republican Congress who's not likely to give an inch on voting rights. And then you have activists and Reverend William Barber, who's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, saying, look, we're frustrated, Joe Biden. We're frustrated with the lack of progress. So is Biden in just a box? Is he in a position where, he's damned if he do and damned if he doesn't? I mean, it seems like he can't get this right on voting rights.
He's saying the words that needs to be said. He's walking with the people that he needs to walk to, but he does not have the power in Congress right now. It is a slim majority, and you would only need a couple of Republicans to get a sense of decency and conscience and try to pass these to strengthen voter rights and to strengthen the vote. But we're also in Capitol Hill with the Republican Party, where too many of them still think stop the steal and Dominion's evil and all these sort of things. Again, I say all the time when I talk about Joe Biden, I think people give him way too hard of a time. I think he's doing far better than everyone's making him out to be. And so I feel for the guy. I know he wants to do this. He's really pushing for this because he also knows that it's not just the right thing to do. It's the politically smart thing to do as 2024 comes in.
No, good point. Obviously, he's a strategist amongst strategists. So we know that he knows that this is not going to just be, like you said, the right thing to do. It's not just the right thing for Black folks. This is the right thing for the Democratic Party if we want to save our democracy. But Treva, do you think Barber and those activists have a point, and that it is because of their willingness to express their frustration? Maybe that works. I don't know. As Gustavo said, there's not a whole lot he can do in terms of that Congress. We just got to go back and win the House in 2024. But does it help to have someone as prominent as Reverend William Barber and others, activists, writing to Congress and writing to Biden, trying to push them to do more?
I think that is the role of the activist. It's the role of the organizer. We are supposed to have critiques. We are supposed to be pushing. We can't be singular in our focus. We have to keep pressure on Biden. That doesn't mean that Biden's not doing something, but to say to keep the pressure that, look, we need this. You need this. The Democratic Party needs this. Voters in this country, irrespective of party, need this. We need access to the ballot. And so I think it's important in understanding the role of organizers, of activists, of voices like Reverend Barber that remain at the forefront, that keep voting rights amidst a country where we have so many things happening right now. We could talk about it from climate change, Hobbs City, home rule in D.C., there's so many things, inflation, that are keeping right now. How do we keep voting rights in the center as well as alongside that? And I think that is the job of activists, of organizers, of groups, to ensure that voting rights is still a top priority for all of those who are invested in actualizing a democracy.
So this is happening, this push for voting rights, Gustavo. At the same time, we saw that California reparations task force had the weekend meetings. They had testimony. They had oral stories from African Americans, and they're going to be out with a report on July 1st, with their recommendations. What are you expecting from this task force? What are you expecting the pushback to be? We saw what happened last week when that article came out about the San Francisco task force and their recommendations that every Black person that lived in San Francisco during a certain period get a $5 million check. The response to that, the backlash was swift. It was pretty intense. What are you expecting happens? It comes out of this California task force that says, hey, we want to be a model for the country. We want to show the country what reparations can look like. And we know as California goes, so does the rest of the state. So what are you expecting?
Yeah, San Francisco is always going to be San Francisco. They're going to go for it. California, especially this reparations task force, they know that this is the model. This is the most populous state, the richest state in the United States, fourth biggest economy in the world, as Gavin Newsom always says. So they want to do something that other people can emulate. And yeah, there's always going to be a segment of the population that says, no, that's in the past. We don't need this. My colleague, Erica D. Smith, has also talked about some of the controversies involved, like who would qualify. And that's one of the things that the reparations task force is talking about. Is it going to be all Black people? It doesn't seem like it's going to be all Black people. So in other words, folks, if you're first generation from Africa, you're not going to qualify for it. But then also the idea is like, oh, you have to prove that your ancestors were enslaved. Well, that's going to be very, very problematic for especially folks who do not have those documents. Like, how do you prove? Like, what, on the census?
No one has their ancestors' slave documents. I don't think any of us are carrying around those documents.
So that's going to be hard, yeah.
That'll be really tough. But Treva, what are you thinking in this moment? How shocking is it to you that we're even at a point where there is a task force that is meeting, that is about to give recommendations? And, they have their controversies. That San Francisco came out and says, look, $5 million. Not many folks believe it's going to pass in that fashion, but we're having mainstream conversations about what used to be a fringe concept.
Yes. And I mean, it's been a concept that's been around. I think people think the reparations conversation is new, and people have been talking about reparations since emancipation. So it's very important to think about the long history of this, and when it actually would have been a little easier in the aftermath of this to really decide how this is going to look, if it's going to look this way. I think you do have wide-scale opposition to it across the country, and I think it's a steep hill climb. irrespective of that. But it is meaningful that this is happening, that this recommendation is going to come out, and that we're going to have to take this seriously, because they're aware that it's going to be taken seriously in terms of how we're talking about reparations at a national level with regards to Black communities in the United States. And I think it's important from a historical standpoint for those of us who've been involved in reparations movements to be clear about what the continued need for these conversations, these task force, these reports, these recommendations are in the wake of so much pushback to the idea that there's racism. It's not shocking that at the same moment people are banning critical race theory, saying we have to teach slavery in this way, we can't teach Columbus in this way, that we somehow jump from slavery to like Martin Luther King and then everything's all good. And looking at textbook controversies, what's happening at New College in Florida, AP African American Studies, that there's a concerted effort of having a lack of information, a gap in information out there that would actually provide us with even more insight into why we're talking about reparations and why it would be significant and so meaningful for the descendants of slaves in the United States. So I think those two happening at the same time is very telling.
Real quickly, Gustavo, Governor Newsom, up or down on reparations?
Oh, he's going to be up. He better be up, and he does really care about the issue. He really does. I mean, he knows. But again,
about that White House too, and I don't know if voting for reparations.
He cares about that White House, but I do think it comes from a good place in his heart as well. Although, of course, he is going to disappoint, just like California is. But at least, again, they want to make it something that's going to work.
Yeah. Well, I have to leave it there. You guys have been amazing as usual. Again, LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano and Ohio State University professor Treva Lindsay. Thanks so much for lending your brilliance. Always a pleasure to see both of you. In my second hour, it's all about true crime and why are we so fascinated with real life murder and crimes that really impact people. And in this second hour, I'm taking your calls, 1-800-920-1580. Give me a call. I want to hear from you. When we come forward after news, sports, and traffic, it's all about true crime right here on KBLA Talk 1580.